And you're all set.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen virtual meeting, December 14th, 2021. Call the meeting to order at 6:01. All selectmen are present. First item of business is public comment. Let me see if I can get my participants list up. If anyone has something they'd like to share with the board, please just raise your hand. All right, I see no one. There is another public comment that will be coming up at the end of the meeting as well. First item of business is the ARPA committee interviews. I just wanted to share with the board that Ms. Haley, I hope I'm saying that right, Haley Halley, has withdrawn her application at this time. Some work commitments came up and she's hoping to be able to serve the town at another time in another position. So Vanessa, can we please bring Ms. Hamilton over? I see she's here. Good evening, Andrea. Welcome. Are you with us? You are muted if you are.
I am. Sorry, I just had to find the mute button on my screen here.
Awesome. Andrea, welcome. It's nice to meet you. I know we've emailed back and forth. So thank you for stepping forward. This is an important committee. They're going to have some great work to do. And basically what we'd like to do is just kind of throw it to you, let you introduce yourself to the board. We'll open it up for the board for any questions, and we'll go from there.
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Andrea Hamilton. I'm a resident of Southborough. I'm actually a two-time resident, so I lived here from 8th grade through my senior year of high school at Algonquin, and moved back about 7 years ago with my husband and our kids to be closer to the grandparents who are still in town, and because it was such a great community to grow up in. So kind of seeing it from both sides now, having been sort of a resident a while ago, and then now coming back again sort of with a young family and seeing it from that perspective. So my background, I'm a scientist by training. I have a PhD in molecular and cellular physiology from Stanford. I've worked in a couple different biotechs in the area, Genzyme, most recently at Cytiva. They do a lot of biochemistry work. I made the decision back in October to put a pause in working for this year to kind of get my family through the COVID hump. It was just becoming too hard to balance school and work and all the different pieces. So my goal right now is to sort of take this year, go back sometime in the fall next year, but it gives me some bandwidth right now, which I think is in part what you're looking for, looking at the timeline that you have for this funding, right? If it's going to impact the fiscal year 23 budget, you need suggestions by March 1. And either way, you need things to present at the May town meeting. So again, I think that's a decent fit. I've got some time right now to commit to it. Sort of if you're thinking about me and who I am and what I bring, again, as a background as a scientist, I'm very data driven. That's kind of my, what I bring to the table. I like numbers. I like to understand, trade-offs. I really like to be able to put a graph up to explain something if I can, so that's really the perspective I bring, right? If we're talking about how much something's going to cost, I would really like to see where those numbers come from and ensure that they are real. If we're talking about value to the citizens of Southborough, if we're talking about, I've seen some things around, reimbursements or being able to bring down our property tax burdens, right? Like, what do those numbers actually look like? Really, if we're going to make statements, let's make sure we have data behind them. I also care a lot about, sort of thinking about the future of Southborough. Again, I've been a part of this community for a long time now, and thinking about, I know we've recently made some changes to our bylaws to be able to have, maybe a more vibrant downtown. And we think about, economic impact to this community. I think we see it a lot in our increase in our property taxes, which I know are tied to some of our loss of commercial business in the town, right? So we're thinking about the future and what does our, ongoing commercial base look like? I think that's a really important thing to consider too. And of course, this money's in response to an unprecedented pandemic crisis, right? So, looking at if there are unmet needs currently within the community that are more acute. It seems like we've done a pretty good job thinking about vaccine clinics and things like that. But, is there currently any unmet need that we're not serving in relation to COVID itself? So that's me. That's kind of what I'm thinking. That's what got me interested in this board and what I think I'd bring to it. So I'm happy to open it up to questions. Yeah.
Great, Andrea. Thank you so much. Again, thank you for stepping forward. It's always exciting for us as a board when we do have new people that haven't served prior, step forward to bring their valuable input. So I thank you for that. We'll open it up to Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. Hi, Andrea. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Thanks for stepping forward. It definitely sounds like you have a good pulse on kind of what we've been discussing as, the ARPA money has become available. So I think sounds like you've done your homework on kind of what the opportunity is. And you may not have one yet, but do you have kind of a philosophy that you're going into this with, or are you kind of just like open slate, let's see what comes before us, or kind of where do you stand as of right now?
Yeah, so I'd like to think that I'm open to feedback, right? So I think it's important to hear what the community wants, to hear what, some of the representatives in the groups that have been most impacted by COVID, our Board of Health, our emergency workers, family services, things like that. But if I have to kind of think about where as you said, my philosophy towards it, right? So I think first and foremost, it's acute need, right? So do we have places in the community that are currently, missing something in response to the pandemic itself? Again, from what I have observed, I think we have had a robust response of vaccine clinics, services to folks who are going through COVID and things like that. But I'm interested in understanding, right, like, are there ongoing acute needs that aren't met? So I think, to me, sort of reading through what this money is for, that's kind of like the first and foremost piece, right? And also whether there's sort of acute economic need, right? Do we have concerns about tenant evictions coming up now that we could use this money towards? So stuff that's really sort of like, is there still an ongoing crisis that we can address with this money within Southborough? So that's kind of my philosophy. That's sort of thing number one. Then from there, I think it becomes, are you thinking more about long-term growth in future and benefit to the town versus kind of a more immediate cash infusion? And so I've seen kind of arguments for both, kind of kicking around on my Southborough on Facebook, things like that, right? So I know with this money, you can do something to, you can do straight cash reimbursement, right? So in theory, you could just take this money and give it back to the citizens of the town, right? Like we could do that. I've seen arguments for doing things to lower, our property tax commitments in the next couple of years. I'm less excited about that because I think when I kind of read what the mandate is, it feels a little more outside of what it's asking for. It does look like it's trying to kind of push you to think about, unmet needs with the town and really focus on the future. So to me, I think it's more exciting to think about, are there areas within the town that we can grow? I think we've all really thought about the value of outside spaces in COVID, right? These last few years. And I know this money can be used for things like if your rec spaces are in bad shape because they got a lot more use than they were expected the last few years, right? Like that's something you can think about in fields. And I know I've seen sidewalks come up. So, right. So something like that, which really like enhances the town. And then similarly, if you're thinking about sort of longer term economic growth opportunities, right, it does a lot that lets you can invest in broadband, you can invest in sewer, which I know is a very hot topic in town, especially in the downtown, right? So those are things that can kind of let us think about more of a long-term investment in our economic growth that I think in turn could potentially lower our tax burden, but is a little different than a one-time cash infusion. So again, I'm open to hearing it because I know it's something that folks feel pretty strongly about, but I guess if I had to think about it again, I'm kind of, there's that acute piece, which is tier one. And then to me, I think it's more interesting to think about kind of how do you apply this towards the future growth of Southborough, but I'm certainly also interested in hearing folks' opinion on that kind of cash infusion perspective.
Great, thank you so much.
Mr. Healy.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, Andrea. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. I really don't have any questions to ask you. It's pretty clear that you've thought an awful lot about this, and you bring some an interesting background to the party. So I think an ARPA committee would be well served by your participation, and it sounds like you would enjoy it. So again, no questions. Just thanks for being willing to throw your hat into the ring for this, and I think you'll maybe fun's too strong a word, but I think you'll enjoy it.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers.
Thank you. Welcome, Andrea. Thanks for volunteering. And you've touched on the points that I had questions about, so I don't have additional questions. I would use the word entertaining maybe for the opportunity here, certainly in one way or another.
I'll take that.
Very popular, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of good feedback, but it does sound like you have a great background for this. And again, thanks for volunteering. That's all from me, Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers. Mr. Dennington.
Thank you. Hi, Andrea. I don't have any questions, but I would say the word that would apply here is impactful. I think you have an opportunity to have a really impactful opportunity because this is a really unique committee, and I think you've got a very you're well suited in terms of your background and experience to participate. So thank you very much for volunteering.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dennington. So Andrea, thank you. We have one more interview, and then the board is going to discuss appointment. So you are certainly welcome to hang around. It would be, great. Ms. Hale, can we bring over Ms. Rubenstein, please? Good evening, Anne. Welcome. You are muted if you're with us. Anne, if you're with us, you're still muted. Hello, Anne. Oh,
hello.
There you are. Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Can you see me? I don't see myself on the screen.
Nope, we do not see you.
Okay.
Oh, there you are.
All right.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Very nice to meet you. Thank you for stepping forward. This is a great opportunity for the town. As we said with Andrea, if you want to just take a few minutes, introduce yourself, what your interest is in serving on this committee, and then we'll open it up to the board.
Thank you. I'm totally different from Andrea. I think I might be a good compliment. We moved to Southborough about almost 5 years ago from Framingham, where we lived for 38 years. I was very involved there in civic affairs. When my kids were young, I was on the school things. I was on the Metro West YMCA board when they were building an extension. I served on Leadership Metro West board for about 12 years. If you're not familiar, that's a leadership development organization for government, community, and business leaders to encourage collaboration. Professionally, I was a journalist and a communications professional. I was the director of public information for the Framingham schools for quite a few years. And that's where I think my skill set and experience will come in handy. I think I did a lot of outreach, organizing public forums, getting translators for meetings. I don't know how much that would be needed here. We did a lot of analysis, prioritizing. I participated in a lot of strategic planning. So I have a background in that. And when I was in newspapers, I was in management. So I did a lot of similar things. I worked locally on school choice, on capital building campaigns for a new high school, that sort of thing. I don't know what else do you want to know. I'm a good listener. I'm very collaborative. I tend to trust being a newbie in Southborough. I would rely on the expertise of department heads to recommend what they think should be needed. I don't know that I have the knowledge to say what those needs are, but I can work with others to prioritize it. I'm open to whatever else you'd like to know.
Great. And thank you very much. And I think you are absolutely right. I think you're a nice complement to what Andrea brings. And I can tell you, we've talked a lot about public participation and how to get the word out to the public. So we may be tapping into you for other things as well. I think you're a fabulous resource. And as far as being a newbie in town, I've been here 20 years and I'll always be 21 years now, and I'll always be a newbie as well. So thank you for stepping forward. We'll open it up to the board. Mr. Healy.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, Ann. How are you?
Hi, very well, thank you.
Also interesting background. And since I get to go first this time, and I will not be surprised at all if the answer is no, but have you taken very much of a look at the ARPA stuff that's been floated out in the media? You have, okay. Oh,
I have. I read the charge first before even applying, but I've been looking at some of the state guidelines. I don't have any real opinion where things should go right now, which to me, I think is an advantage because I don't have any bias. I don't think Public Works should get it or the senior center should get it or whatever. I'm open to all suggestions.
All right. Well, no preconceived notions is a good thing, not a bad thing. So I'm all set. And by the way, the Metro West Y turned out just fine. So
they built another edition since then. So.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. All right. So that's a nice credential to have in your back pocket. But nice meeting you, and I'll pass you along to whoever's next.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stivers.
Thanks. Good evening, Ann, and thank you for applying. Appreciate your interest in this. I think it's a great opportunity. Just to follow on to Mr. Healy's question, have you actually followed what's going on in town government generally over the last several years in terms of what the departments are doing and town meeting discussions, et cetera, so you've got some context for the current activities?
Yes, particularly the downtown discussion and some of the business developments and the issues around that. I have not followed the schools very closely. I'll say that, but I read the news and follow discussion. My husband's on a few committees, so
right.
He tells me what's going on there. Okay.
That could be good news or bad news. But again, that's helpful. Thank you. And again, it seems to me that, as you suggest, a strong issue in terms of taking input from the various department heads in terms of details of things that their particular areas might need support for. But ultimately, the challenge is prioritizing and making recommendations, which it sounds like you've got a good experience for. So thank you for applying. And that's all for me.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers. Mr. Dennington.
Hi, Ann. Again, sounds like you have a great background. And I think you shouldn't discount, there's a real value in being relatively new to town. I'm also still relatively new to town, 8 years. Do you have any, I understand, you've got an open mind, but one of the things that we've been wrestling with is one of the things that you could do with the money is to just basically use it to reduce property taxes instead of actually expending it. And do you have any inclination or feelings about that issue one way or the other?
Taxes are always tough. I'd hate to take a step back in taxes myself. I would prefer to apply the money somewhere where there's a real need. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a general relief if you apply it to taxes, but I don't know. I mean, I'm up to consider anything, but my first thought would be to apply to specific projects.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you very much for volunteering. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Mr. Dennington. Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. Hi, Ann. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I don't have any specific questions. Just a comment that I think your skill set plays right into the public outreach, like Lisa mentioned, and that's a big part of why we wanted to put this committee together, was to get as much input as possible and have you kind of synthesize what that looks like. So I think you and Andrea would be a great addition to the current members of this committee. So I look forward to supporting your appointment.
Great. Again, Ann, thank you so much for stepping forward, and you know, it's appreciated knowing that, you know, Barry has done some pretty amazing things for the town on the committees he served on. To have you step forward as well is very much appreciated. So I thank you. At this time, the board is just going to, I think our choice is pretty easy. I think we have two good people to step forward. If the board, I'm comfortable with appointing the two that have stepped forward. I think that the skill sets are great and they offset each other well. Seems like we have kind of a consensus on that. So that being said, do we have a motion to appoint Andrea Hamilton and Ann Rubenstein to the ARPA committee, to the 2 resident seats, term to expire 6/30/22?
So move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, Ms. Melanowski.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Mr. Healy.
The one thing I will say is, on the one hand, it's disappointing that we didn't get a chance to talk to Ms. Haley, because she also had a very interesting and impressive background. But she did make our decision a lot easier, because we would have had to pick between 2 out of 3 very impressive backgrounds. So on the one hand, I hope she comes back and throws her hat in the ring for something else. But I think we ended up in very good shape. So it's an aye.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
And Ms. Braccio, aye. Congratulations and thank you. And you'll be hearing from the town soon. So again, thank you for coming, both you and Andrea. Much appreciated. All right. And Marty, I agree with your point, and it's certainly, sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just had one.
Nope, that's okay.
Which is that for both Andrea and Ann, it might be interesting because the meeting that we're going to have with advisory in about an hour is very relevant and kind of some background to some of the things that the ARPA committee is going to deal with. So I don't know if Ann and Andrea have other plans, but I would encourage them to maybe watch some of the video either in real time or recorded. Could be very interesting.
Okay, great, Andrew. Thank you. So just to finish my thought, I agree, Marty, and I think there's great opportunity, and she has expressed an interest. It's just commitments. We all know commitments have kind of taken over. So, all right. That being said, let's go to members' report. I have nothing under chairs at this point. Members' report. Sam, I believe this is you for the.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Who was the?
I put it on.
Oh,
Lisa.
okay, Andrew. Go ahead. Sorry, Andrew. I apologize.
That's okay. I'll be really brief. So some of you may recall getting an email from Marika Munsif about an EDC meeting where Gary Holmes, who is a local commercial real estate broker, gave kind of the EDC an overview of the challenges facing the commercial real estate market, both in Southborough and in the Metro West area generally. Sam and I attended. Because I was driving, it began at 9 a.m. and I was driving most of the time. I only really caught the last part of it, but I thought it was a very interesting discussion. The one fact which kind of came out of that Marika then summarized in an email was that the commercial vacancy rate is approaching now 1/3 in Southborough, which is a really distressing number. And so there's it's a problem where there's not a short-term solution to it, but I think it was very interesting and got you thinking, and I would encourage people, if you have some free time, to watch the discussion. I may go back and rewatch it again. I don't. Sam was also there for the whole time, and I don't know if he has anything else to add about it.
Thanks, Andrew. Not really. I mean, the issue again is finding a way to motivate investment and businesses to move into town, and sewer was a very active topic here, and that's something we all are aware of. And so, again, it's a challenge, but I continue to believe that with this infrastructure money, there's some opportunity for us to do some things, and that's certainly something I hope will be on the radar for this committee that's going to be looking at this, trying to figure out are there ways that we can do this. So interesting and good to get reinforced from sort of the front lines, from people who are actually working to lease space in town and talking to businesses who are looking for space. I think that's valuable input, certainly. And I also agree with Andrew that folks ought to take a chance to look at that if they can on the YouTube recording of that meeting.
Relatively short too, so.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Haley.
Yeah, no, Gary Holmes is great. I watched it as well. The one thing, and I know we're not supposed to get into an extended discussion for a member's report, but it was pretty scary how Amazon and its ilk are taking over the world. And the idea that warehouse space is now significantly more valuable than office space or anything else. That's just, again, it's the way of the world in 2021, but it was kind of stark to hear it laid out the way Mr. Holmes did.
Sorry. Great. Thank you, Marty. Much appreciated. All right. Mr. Purple, Town Administrator's Report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be brief. Couple of items, and Ms. Malinowski can jump in on this with me if she'd like. There is a booster clinic for the public on December 22nd at the Southborough Senior Center from 1 to 4. The sign up is online. There's a link and everything up on the website on where to go and how to get it. It is Moderna booster at this point. I know that boosters have been hard to come by, and we've been trying to work on a regional basis to try to get trays of boosters, whether it be Pfizer, Moderna, to offer to residents and that. So my understanding is that as of last that I knew, that there were still slots available. So please, make sure you go in and take advantage of this opportunity. Again, it's at the Southborough Senior Center, Wednesday, December 22nd from 1 to 4 p.m. And you do need to register in advance. Did I miss something?
I was just going to add that we also have put in a 16 to 17-year-old booster clinic for this Thursday at Algonquin. So that came out after the announcement that age group is eligible for boosters. So I just wanted to add that.
Okay, thank you. Again, those that, when the boosters first came out, you could get appointments anywhere you wanted. And now people are waiting weeks to find appointments for them. So I'm glad that the Board of Health and our health department, as well as Northborough and others in our region, are working to try to make these available to town employees as well as residents. Oh, I thought Mr. Healy had a question. Sorry, just an itch. Yeah. Just a quick update. The VHB traffic study that we had gotten the approval for the funding at town meeting. I talked with Ms. Galligan, and the traffic counts have not been done yet. They're trying to find time in which to do that, in which the weather would cooperate for a period of time. It may end up being in the spring when this actually happens, although I'm trying to work with her, to work with the consultant to try to get this done quicker so that we can start getting some results and try to move this forward. Again, if the weather cooperates, then we can have that done quicker. The next item, we had at town meeting, we had passed an article for the transition from Board of Selectmen to Select Board. I'm not going to dwell on the name change, but I will say that, we've tried to start to make the transition just to try to stay ahead of the curve. I don't see that the AG is going to not approve the change. However, there's been some comment about moving before the AG has approved. So we've kind of taken a step back, reset, and we'll wait until the AG, gives their official approval. I think that those changes and everything in terms of the branding and the website and everything else can be done fairly quickly. So we jumped a little bit, we've moved back, and we will hold position until the AG gives us their approval, hopefully shortly. The last item was something that just came in, I think it was last night. We received notice from David Emmer in Senator Eldridge's office that the governor has in fact now signed the state ARPA legislation, which included an earmark of $70,000 for the town to replace and repair the culvert underneath Northborough Road. We've taken a quick look. Karen has worked with, Ms. Galligan has worked with the engineer to get an updated estimate. Looks like the project could cost just slightly north of $100,000. This is still great news because a lot of it is going to be funded from the state. We'll know exactly how much it's going to be when this goes out to bid in the spring. But again, this is good news that this funding has survived. There may be other pieces of funding in there as part of programs and available funding for, for water or for something else in that we'll have to apply for and go through a process. This was directly applied to Southborough. So I'd like to thank Senator Eldridge's office, his staff, Selectman Dennington for bringing this opportunity forward. He was the first one that had gotten reached out to, passed it through to me, worked with the senator's staff, and we made this happen. And Representative Dykema also added her support. So again, appreciate, collaboration does work, and this is another great effort. I don't know if Andrew has anything he'd like to add.
No, well, Mark, just wanted to echo your thanks to the senator and his staff for advocating for Southborough. And I also want to thank you, Mark, for really jumping on the opportunity when it came about a couple months ago. Thank you.
And I will just say, as an epilogue to all of this, that the senator's staff has said, okay, so now they're looking for potential earmarks for the FY23 budget process. Again, those are a little more tenuous. They have a greater likelihood of getting cut because they're being supported by tax dollars and not federal one-time money. So we'll take a look at those with the senator and also with Representative Dykema as well. But again, wanted to end my report on a little bit of good news. So that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. And thank you to everyone. Obviously a great effort by all. So very good news for the taxpayers. All right, next up, consent agenda. I'm going to hold B. Are there any other holds? Any holds to A? Nope. Any holds to C? No. Okay. That being said, do we have a motion to approve consent agenda item A and C as printed?
So move.
Thank you. Second? Is there a second? Sorry. Thank you. Roll call. Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Healy.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
And Ms. Braccio. Aye. Thank you. The reason that I held on to the next item was I'm sure, I don't know if everyone had an opportunity to see the email that came in just before our meeting that Wendy's has closed in Southborough. Unfortunately, it was abruptly done, but unfortunately, it was a corporate decision, I guess. So when we make this motion, we just need to make sure that we exclude Wendy's from the common victualler license. Go ahead, Mr. Purple.
So thank you for noting that again. That was, and I'm not going to call out Mrs. Hale, but I will. She went to get a soda this afternoon, and she came back and she said, Wendy's is gone. and so did a little bit of researching. It seemed that was the indication in their online presence. And Melanie in our office had reached out to the person she'd been dealing with, who confirmed it, who provided the email that we sent out last minute to the board. I do want to acknowledge, before you go ahead and approve this list, which I hope you will do, the efforts of all the staff in the Selectman's office this year. We had some new people coming in and trying to figure out how everything worked. And it was a real collaborative effort. I think everybody did, a really nice job. And I do appreciate the fact that, this has been a little bit of an issue this year because we have a more fully functional, more full-time operational, I guess is a better way to put it, health department. And they've kind of become a partner, in some of these inspections and everything and that. And we've figured out a couple of kinks and everything and a way to integrate them into the process moving forward. So really appreciate the things that Dr. Alker, as well as Diane, the food inspector, that we're getting through the regional grant has brought to this and that, just tremendous value. And so again, I'm the one sitting here who usually, gets these approved, but I do want you to know that I'm just the face, and there's a lot of good people behind the scenes that are really making this stuff happen. So I just wanted to acknowledge them.
Thank you. Chelsea, do you want to just take 1 second and do you want to add anything about the Board of Health and the inspections?
Yes. So the health department, including Diane from Northborough, as Mark mentioned, have been working very diligently to get all our restaurants educated, and then doing a full inspection to make sure everything ticks and tie. So I can't thank Dr. Alker and Diane enough for getting us to where we should be. And I look forward to continuing to do that on an annual basis with them.
Great. Thank you. Sam, go ahead.
Question. Yeah, last time we talked about this, there was a question about are all of the food establishments now inspected and passed the inspections? And I'm assuming that's the case at this point.
So I believe that there's one that has not been, Sam, but there is not a hold. There is no reason to hold up the common vic license for that at this point.
Okay. All right.
There's no known issues. There's just, I believe that there's one outstanding.
Okay, just so we don't vote for something that it has a problem to start with. So I'm assuming that the inspector is on top of that one and we'll sort that out. Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Great. Thank you, Sam.
Just to clarify Ms. Malinowski's comments, I think that, a good way to put it is that any issues that have been identified, the businesses are actively working with the Board of Health and with the health staff to ensure that they get corrected. So there's no reason not to reappoint them, or not to renew the license. And obviously, if at some point in the future, they decide not to be working with the Board of Health, then we can address the issue. But I think that everybody is working to get where the Board of Health is requiring them to be. So that's a good sign.
All right. Thank you. I just have one correction for you, Mr. Purple. Ms. Hale was also getting a salad. So before we say it was just a soda, let's put the healthier tint back on
I
it
was
as well.
not aware of the salad. I was only aware of the drink. I can neither confirm nor deny there was anything
Nope.
green involved.
There was
To
green
counteract the
involved.
soda.
I can confirm that. So just to make sure that we're clear that this wasn't just a junk food run. So
Okay.
that being said, thank you. Do we have a motion to approve calendar 2022 licenses minus the Wendy's company on Turnpike Road?
So move.
Do we have a
Second.
second? Thank you. Roll call. Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
I,
and Ms. Braccio. Thank you, Andy. Ms. Braccio, aye. Thank you very much. Next up, draft charge for St. Mark's Street Park Working Group. Andrew, do you want me to turn this one over to you to start?
yes. So you should see in the packet a version 2 of this document. I know Sam likes the red line version, so I was doing a red line version, and then when you click like stop tracking changes, and then you keep making changes and you forget to press the button back. So I'm just going to give a oral red line, which is the changes are 7 at-large members, not dependent on anyone being a member of any committee. Working group elects its own chair, vice chair, and secretary. In the 4th paragraph, there's a slight revision to reflect a comment from Jim Hegarty. It says all records of the working group shall be filed with the select board, and all agendas, minutes, and records of appointment shall be filed with the town clerk. That's because Jim said that a BOS appointed committee really files its records with the select board, other than documents that should be with the town clerk. And the final paragraph includes Sam's suggested comment about soliciting and encouraging public comment at the meetings. And in the last sentence, changed working group shall deliver a recommendation to the select board to shall aim to deliver a recommendation to the select board, so that it's provides a date, but is more provides some leeway.
Great. Andrew, thank you. And thank you for putting this together. We'll go around if there's any questions or comments. Mr. Stivers.
Looks fine to me. Thank you.
Okay. Andrew, I'm sure it looks fine to you as well. We'll go around. Ms. Malinowski,
Looks good. Thank you.
Mr. Healy,
Good here. Andrew, you're way too young to be befuddled by track changes, though.
Mr. Purple. You're muted, Mark.
Sorry, I have one question based on the earlier discussion of the transition from Board of Selectmen to Select Board.
Okay,
This has select board all the way through. Would you like
Yeah.
to change it to Board of Selectmen? Okay.
yes. Okay, wonderful. That being said, do we have a motion to accept the charge for the St. Mark's Street Park Working Group as amended?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, Ms. Melanowski. Sorry, Chelsea, I didn't hear
Aye.
you. Okay,
Aye.
thank you. Thank you. Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
and Ms. Braccio, aye. And again, Andrew, thank you very much for that. Next up is a continuation of the discussion. Oh, sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
So just in terms of next steps, will the townhouse be advertising interest? Okay.
So,
Yep, it will.
so what I will do is I'll finalize the document, just change, I think the only thing we changed out would be what I suggested with the select board of selectmen. Put the approval date on it, file it with the clerk's office, and then advertise for interested parties. Hopefully we'll have people that for you to interview at your meeting on January 4th. Also put an item on there for you to make appointments. If you like who you've got, then you can make appointments that evening and we can get going.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Next up, draft policy for recording clerks. So this is something we had talked about at the last meeting. There were some questions. I'm going to bring Vanessa in on this. I know she had put a memo together and addressed some of the questions. She did a great job, and I appreciated working with her on this. So Vanessa, if you want to go ahead and give an update.
Sure. So thank you very much. So the memo that is before you gives a bit of a summary of what boards and committees are paying a recording clerk and what that fee might be. You can see there is a little bit of differentiation between some of the boards and committees. And we also wanted to provide information for you on who is taking minutes for the balance of the committees. Some of that is handled by a staff person, like the ZBA, for example, or the Board of Health, et cetera. But much of it is covered by a board or committee member. In most cases, it's been designated to one particular person. I did make a notation where it says various committee scribes, if that duty is shared among other members of the committee. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great, Vanessa, thank you. So I will just share as we went through as well. I know there's a recommendation in here, which was similar to what we had talked about prior. As I looked through some of the boards and committees, I mean, some of them aren't meeting every month. So I tried to take an average, I know we had talked about what the dollar figure would be. And if we did an average based on what's in the second chart of 8 meetings a year at the 150 rate, it comes out to roughly $24,000. So that's just, again, some just general information to add. Vanessa, thank you for putting this together. We'll go around. We'll start with Mr. Dennington for any questions or comments.
I just want the $24,000 figure that you're referring to. That's to do minutes for which boards again?
So in the second chart, it starts with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And I just averaged, Andrew, because some of those, again, aren't meeting every month. Some are meeting, sometimes twice a month. It depends. So I just averaged an 8 just to come up with a roundabout number of what could be. So I did it at, there's 20 committees here. At 8 comes out to the 160 times 150 comes out to roughly $24,000.
Okay. Those are committees that don't have a recording secretary. Okay.
Yeah.
No, the memo is clear and follows up on the discussion that we had previously. So I don't have any other comments or questions.
Great, thank you, Ms. Melanowski.
So are you looking for us to define in the first chart if those minute takers were in agreement should be budgeted for FY23, or I guess what are you looking for?
So what we had talked about was putting a policy in place for minute takers, and obviously this would affect 23 going into 23. And the question was asked, who currently has minute takers? And that's who's listed. if we, my suggestion to the board was to have permitting boards, executive board being the Board of Selectmen, and advisory, which would mean out of this list, EDC, SHOPC, historical, master plan's almost done anyway, and I really think they probably need a scribe to finish those, that a lot goes on at those meetings. So you'd be looking to basically take 3 out of what currently has a minute taker. And then set the pay rate at the $50 that we had talked about, which is more equitable, you know, for boards and committees that go over the 3-hour period.
Okay, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Healy,
All good.
Mr. Stivers.
Thanks. I got a couple of questions, Lisa. So the $24,000 figure is for the additional committees that we're talking about here. So what,
Yeah.
what is the total cost for minute takers for both the first chart and the second chart, roughly?
So I don't have that. I don't know that we pulled that together, Sam, because I
Okay.
mean, planning board meets twice a month, Board of Selectmen meets twice a month, conservation, it
Okay.
depends on what's on.
That's
Their
not a
agenda.
showstopper. I was just curious as to what the total number is. And just to be clear, so I understand this, are we talking about $50 an hour of meeting time? That's the
Yep.
yardstick. So it's not $50 an hour for an individual who has to spend 6 hours on a minutes for a meeting that lasted 20 minutes kind of thing. So,
Yeah, no,
okay,
um,
so I
how-
think that's pretty fair.
Okay. Sorry, Sam, I didn't mean to interrupt. How we kind of came at this was, so you figure on a 3-hour meeting, you know, it's obviously 3 hours to take notes, and then, you know, at least, you know, half of that time to be able to put something together. So we were trying to come up with, it's not really 50. If you're really looking at it, it's actually less than that, but it's just more equitable.
Yep.
So,
I think that's the right way to measure it in terms of meeting time. And so if you get someone who's fast, they can make a little more money. If they're slow at it, a little less hourly rate, but that's a good yardstick, I think. So I'm fine with it. And again, I think it's good to have it consistent across all committees here, and we'll see how it works. If there's a problem, we'll hear about it and we can address it. Thanks.
okay. And so what we'll do is I'll work with Vanessa. We'll put the policy together and we'll have it on the agenda now that we know exactly what that the board is in agreement with this path. We'll put something together and we'll have it on the agenda on January 4th. Chelsea?
Can we, in the meantime, have someone reach out to the committees that we're proposing? We're eliminating the minute taker from the budget for FY23, just to let them know that we're discussing this and, you know, this is forthcoming.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so great. Thank you, everybody. Much appreciated on that. Next up, funding for local match for EEA grant acceptance of grant award. Ms. Malinowski, this was you.
It was, and I'm going to ask Mr. Purple to give an update first, please.
Sure. First one in the barrel. Okay. So this is, I think this is pretty straightforward. I had a nice conversation with Rob Anderson, who's the chair of EDC. You know, I think that the local match is fairly easy to attain. There were three places that the application had looked at as sources, potential sources for the match. One was in-kind services from various departments, one was CPC funding, and one was the consulting funding from the EDC budget for the FY23 budget. And I think that in talking with Mr. Anderson, you know, we both, he agreed, I suggested, he agreed that the EDC coordinator, you know, should be managing this grant. And he agreed, and that is going to bump up the local match, the in-kind hours and dollars fairly quickly. I believe in his response back to me with Marika being the key point contact and coordinator for the grant, she's probably going to exceed the in-kind allocation from the various departments and the CPC all on her own, which will then lessen, you know, and go above that, which probably then will lessen any reliance on the consulting money in the EDC budget. So there is a definite path forward, you know, and given that wastewater has become a central theme for EDC, whether it be in the downtown or be on Route 9. I think there's a clear path forward, and I see no reason why the board shouldn't move forward with formally accepting the grant, and we can get that paperwork going.
All right, go ahead, Chelsea.
So, and I did have some correspondence with Ms. Reynolds after our discussion at our meeting last week. And I think she brought up a good point. And this relates into the policy that is on my lap to draft related to spending of grant monies and town monies. But it's to include the process for what should happen when we apply for a grant, and making sure that, everything's kind of connected when we're doing budget reviews, and making sure that we have the in-kind portion. So that was a good suggestion that came out of that correspondence. So I'll make sure that I include those points when I draft the policy. And I would just, I saw that a meeting posted for Friday morning, and I'll try to jump onto that meeting just to make sure that kind of what we discussed here, they are on board with. If everybody wants me to.
Okay, great. I'm seeing a shake of heads here. So are there any other questions before we move to take a vote on this? Okay, wonderful. So do we have a motion to accept the EEA grant for analysis of wastewater for Route 9?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Roll call. Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Healy.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
And Ms. Braccio. Aye. Great. Thank you very much. Last up is the draft warrant for March 26, 2022 town meeting. Mr. Purple.
Madam Chair, the warrant is scheduled to close on January 4th at your next meeting. And at that point, all known articles and placeholders need to be submitted at that time. I wanted the board at least to have a quick look at what you have in place right now. I'm not going to run through this whole thing. I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you may have about what is here. But after you get past the first 7-8 pages of the moderator's rules, and you get to the articles, it's a lot of the annual articles with regards to accepting donations, authorizing borrowing, contracts in excess of 3 years, the budget items, both operating, water, and capital. You get into the CPA, and so on and so forth. The second to last page is really where I've listed all of the new articles that the requests for placeholders that have been submitted, and I can just run through those very quickly. The first one is the payment of accrued leave time for retirees. This is something that we fund on an as-needed basis. The treasurer's office will take a look with Ms. Hale and try to see who is eligible to retire and try to calculate out what those payments of accrued leave time would be. And then, we come back to town meeting and seek that funding so that we have that in place. Oftentimes employees are eligible to retire and they love it so much they decide to stay, and we continue to carry those funds, but we just need to make sure that they are there. CPA projects, not sure what the totality of those will be. I'll have to work with CPC to see what they're bringing forward this year. Planning board has requested a placeholder for a tree bylaw. I believe that they have been discussing that at their meeting, and I know that there is, some discussion between what we're doing and what we should be doing and what we could be doing, and so I know that those conversations are ongoing. Establishing Trails Committee as a standing committee, which I know is something has been brought to you by Ms. McKee. rescinding the remaining unused borrowing authorization for the public safety facility. We have borrowing authorization we never used, and so we just need to simply rescind that so that it's no longer available for use. Capital project for Newton Street water pipe replacement. This is a capital project that I believe that the capital does support. However, it's going to be its own separate article because it's not simply going to be funded through the water funds. There are already existing borrowings that have residuals in them that can be applied to offset the cost of this. And so that's a project. I actually saw an email come through today. I did not get a chance to read it, from bond counsel to structure the whole article for us. So we'll have a draft of that for your meeting on the 4th. Selectman Dennington had suggested working on a bylaw to regulate the process for boards and committees authorized to promulgate their own rules and regulations as to how that actually happens. I don't know if that's something you wanted to speak to briefly now.
Sure. So you might remember that some point in the summer, it might have been one of the few meetings we had that it was in person in the townhouse. I had suggested that we have a little administrative procedure bylaw for the town, for the boards that have the authority under their bylaws to create their own rules and regulations. And it was something very, very simple that would just say that in order for any town board or committee to promulgate rules and regulations, they have to hold a public meeting to consider the proposed rules, post a draft of them in advance of the meeting, provide a copy to either the select board or the town administrator so that the town council can review them and opine on whether they're valid, and that unless you follow those very simple steps that the rules would not be valid. And this is just to prevent, just to make clear that this is the proper procedure for issuing rules and regulations, so that a board can't issue rules that don't that go beyond the scope of its authority under the bylaw. I'm thinking of something in mind, very, very simple, and I would have in mind working with Jay Tallerman to try to, and probably Jim Hegarty to, this is something that could be as simple as, just 3 paragraphs, 2 or 3 paragraphs.
Andrew, just one question on that.
Yes.
So town meeting years ago on rules and regulations, and I may be wrong, I think for the ZBA, there was a process put in place. Is this going to be in line with that? Or would...
Okay, I remember that at the special town meeting about the ZBA rules and the quorum issue, there was a proposal that for the ZBA to promulgate rules and regulations, they need to be approved by the town meeting, right? And I'm pretty confident that failed.
Okay.
Okay.
I wasn't sure.
It was like 2016 or 2017, but so I don't think that that's affected. And there are some, some boards that, I just have to work with Jay about like how the planning board issues subdivision rules and regulations. We're not really looking to get into the details, but just to make clear that there's public opportunity for public comment on changes to rules.
Great. Okay, Andrew, thank you. I couldn't remember exactly where we stood on town meeting on that, and I don't want to make sure that there was an issue. I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So the next,
Mr. Haley, 1 second.
Oh,
Mr. Purple,
sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Just for context, I know we talked about it in the summer. If you, for federal statutes and for federal agencies, there is the Federal Administrative Procedures Act. For state boards, committees, et cetera, there's a State Administrative Procedures Act. One of the things I think, Andrew, you discovered is that there's not a Municipal Administrative Procedures Act. And so this basically would be trying to import the requirements that already exist at the federal level and the state level. And I'm assuming some other communities have it. It's not some unusual step that the town would be taking. It basically would be importing the sort of requirements that already exist in other venues to the town level. Am I right about that?
Yes, except this would not be nearly as complicated.
No, okay.
just notice an opportunity to comment before rules take effect. That's it.
Go ahead, Sam.
Andrew, would this apply to independently elected boards like the planning board, for example, Board of Health? I'm not sure we could do that.
I have thought of that.
Or school board, actually.
I don't know if we can do that, and that's one thing that I would ask Jay about. But it seems
Who's we? I think town meeting can do it.
Town meeting could do it.
Right, and that's what this is intended to do.
okay, I see the point that you're making.
Yeah, I think, but
I mean, the beginning point is to just, for tonight's purposes, it's there as a placeholder, and it sounds like there's enough agreement to keep it as a placeholder. And then the next step is looking at a draft to think about these questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Purple.
Next is an article that the school has brought forward before for a capital stabilization fund for the regional school. Northborough passed this 2 years ago, but obviously nothing can happen until Southborough passes it. So that's something for us to consider. Next, funding mitigation funds for sidewalks from Legacy Farms and Stonebrook Village. This was mitigation money that was received for these two projects, but mitigation money has to be received and then closed out at the end of the fiscal year, becomes free cash. And if we don't repurpose it, it's just going to sit there. And unfortunately, somebody would forget about it. So the thought process is that that funding should be put into an article and identified as such and for the purpose, and then becomes a funding source. Should a sidewalk project come up, that could offset the cost of the project. So at this point, there is nothing that is being applied to. It is simply just making the funds now available for the purpose they were given to us for. Article to accept the new collective bargaining agreements and fund first year of contracts for any agreements that are ready for town meeting. To see if the town transfers some of money out of the water retained earnings for use in the FY22 water budget. This pandemic is wreaking havoc on our usage, and it's making it very unstable, and we may need to use some reserves in order to try to balance out the FY22 water budget, and then maybe to try to help us with 23, depending on how things go. There was a request from Shopsy for an article to release the CPC funds previously voted by town meeting for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Committee purposes and allow them to be expended without further authorization. And this is something that I know that the Shopsy chair has been speaking with town council about. So we'll take his guidance on that. Easements for St. Mark's Park, Street Park and Roadway, which would replace the reciprocal license that is already in place. Capital Planning Committee as a standing committee as a bylaw. And then finally, noticing how often they're meeting, I think it's a real possibility that we will have a noise bylaw for consideration for the spring meeting as well. So that's the totality of what I've got now. If there's something that you want to add, please feel free to send it to me and I'll put it on the list. Again, things that close on the warrant as a placeholder don't necessarily grow up to become articles, but you know, there's a chance that they will. So that's all I have.
Okay, Ms. Malinowski, did you have something?
Yes, I was going to say noise. And then my second question is, should we consider adding an article to put in for a fall town meeting on an annual basis? And the reason why I'm asking is I think the conversation that we're going to have at advisory, I think there's maybe some conversation that we'll have about when we'll know what the actual split is between residential and commercial, and is there a value to being able to shift funds around as needed if we see a swing in the future, like we just did. And in looking at the town clerk's budget, it doesn't look like there's anything allocated right now for a fall town meeting. And so if we think we may have an intention of having a fall town meeting, I think we need to look at potentially adding something to that budget.
Thank you. Actually, I certainly am in favor of a fall town meeting. And I'll tell you, I think it would make town meeting more attractive to a lot of families as well. It's tough for families with kids and otherwise. It's a long day on a Saturday. And if we could split it up between the two, lots of towns do it and they do it successfully. So I'm certainly in support. Any other thoughts, Mr. Healy?
I think it's worth having a conversation.
Yeah. Mr. Dennington?
I also think it's a good idea for a placeholder. I mean, I'm inclined to support it, but need to think about it a little bit further.
Yep. Agreed. Mr. Stivers?
Same feeling. Good to have it in there, and we can
Yeah.
always change it if we don't need it.
Okay. Mr. Purple, will you add that, please?
I will do that. I will say the one thing, I think the one benefit to having a fall meeting is that you can determine when you want to take up certain issues that, you know, if you're going to take up capital in the fall, when you want to, you know, when is the preferred time to take up zoning articles, you know, that type of thing. So you really can structure your year based on, you know, what type of issues you tend to handle at what meeting. So.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone have anything else?
I have just a question about Article 26, and Mark, you were just explaining this, but so Legacy Farms is in Hopkinton, right?
Yes.
So, but the town got money from Legacy Farms.
We did.
35,000.
Oh, okay,
It was I believe it was a traffic mitigation, Andrew.
interesting.
Okay. Yeah, Yeah.
Insufficient, but welcome.
absolutely. And I will say on the Stonebrook that when that was specifically earmarked in the planning board decision, that in lieu, you know, that this donation would be made or the sidewalks could be replicated. So. Go
Sorry,
ahead,
can I
Chelsea.
just ask a general timing question for Mr. Purple? So all the placeholders have to be in by January 4th. And then we close the warrant then? And so are we confident that people are well aware of that?
Yeah, I think we've sent out, you know, I've sent out multiple notices and sent out notices to all boards and committees, all departments, that we extended it because it was going to be closed on the 21st, but then we played around with our schedule this month and just decided to extend it to the 4th. So can send out another reminder just to make sure. I think we've got a good grouping here. I think the things that we've gotten back, you know, shows that people have gotten it. I can send something out one more time, maybe the end of this week, beginning of next, just to remind people that it is coming up.
And to Ms. Bracio's point last week on the timing of town meeting, do we want, I know there's probably a lot more conversations to be had. And maybe this is too soon to add an article, but to revisit when the timing of annual town meeting. At least I don't know if that's something that you think we're going to be prepared for, or we probably need to wait until maybe the fall to do that.
So I haven't had the opportunity to sit with Ms. Laveau yet. We've been texting back and forth. We're trying to set up a time to be able to do this. I mean, we could certainly put something in and just pull it if we need to, or hopefully I'll have more information if we put something in now by the 4th when we close it. If I don't think it's going to be possible, or, you know, we're really far apart, then we could certainly pull it and potentially look at it for a fall, if there's a fall. So, Mark, would you put that in just as a placeholder?
Well, I could add it into the placeholder in terms of codifying a fall town meeting and just add it
Perfect.
in there, and that gives you that latitude.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you. Thank you, Chelsea.
You're welcome.
Okay, nothing else I see? All right, at that point, that brings us to public comment. If there's anybody that would like to comment, please raise your hand. All right, I see no one. And that being said, do we have a motion to adjourn
So move.
To adjourn for 20 minutes.
for 20 minutes? Exactly. So I was gonna say, I'll see you all at 7:30. Okay, roll call vote, Ms. Melanowski,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
and Ms. Braccio. Aye. Great. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you at 7:30.
Thank you.
Thank you.